jer si milostivi čovekoljubiv Bog i tebi slavu uznosimo, Otcu i Sinu i Svetome Duhu, sada i uvek i u vekove vekova.
In a world of shadows and secrets untold, where primeval stories make the brave go cold, mighty gods on high and realms below, whispers of legends that shape each soul. And nightmarish dreams, cryptids lurking, nothing's as it seems, giants walking, angels and demons fight, only truth can bring the light. Through the echoes of time, the tales unfold, mysteries arise as the prophecies are foretold, from valiant knights to buried treasure, this podcast brings nothing but pleasure. Welcome to Mysteries and Majesty. Study with us, don't be a travesty. Theology, mythology, fantasy, and horror. Dungeons and dragons, Skyrim and Mordor. Phantom powers haunt the evening, in gothic castles where they're screaming. Wizards cast spells in their towers tonight, exploiting enigmas hidden from our sight. Archaeologists make excavations deep of the ancient tombs where pharaohs sleep. In the dust of ages we chronicles keep, storytelling's power of monsters that creep. Mysteries and Majesty is the place for you to learn about this haunted space. From scholarship to manuscripts of old, unlock the secrets of wisdom and gold.
Blessed Friday evening, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode on Myths, Mysteries, and Majesty. Shaun, I don't know if it's just me, but I was honestly missing this segment because this segment brings so much fun, so much, in a maybe odd way, happiness to my soul. Because even though we're covering sometimes serious stories of people dealing with supernatural, spiritual warfare and attacks and whatnot, but also in every story we try to find positive things, encourage the audience, teach them, and also sometimes we are laughing. And it just reminds me of the people in the ancient times, just gathering around the campfire and telling stories, and kids will be always like, putting blankets because they'll be scared, and getting closer to the adults, and then the adults will like sharing, hunting stories or like other stories, and always they will like add certain effects. Certain details to spice up the stories. But there's something when it comes to these stories, it's not just learning, it's also this bonding with others through these mutual experiences that are usually told through stories, right? And there's this something like camaraderie, the spirit of camaraderie when you like do something that you love with others. There's this special bond that happens. So I was like, we've been doing so many scholarly and weird things in the last several months, but barely going back to this segment of the ear encounters. So I was just saying I missed it, and I'm so glad that for tonight we don't have to cover something whatever we covered, in the last several Fridays, but we were able to go back to our segment. So I just wanted to start that by asking you, did you feel the same?
Oh, I missed it. I love the scary stories. I love the paranormal, the creepiness, and what I love most of all is in telling these stories, we're able to relate it to our worldview, which is such a refreshing thing for Christians to be doing, because when people have these encounters, a lot of times they're driven away from the church because of the fact that most often the churches that they go to don't have an explanation. They can't fit this into their worldview. And so you're either telling somebody that they didn't experience something, or you're telling them that oh, it's just demonic and this, that, and the other thing. When in reality, there's a lot of variety in the spiritual realm, and we know that from reading the Bible in the way that the original authors would have read it. That there is variety in the spiritual world, and it is a very dynamic place. It's not as static as what some of the church tradition would like us to believe. And so by using the Bible as our kind of North Star in interpreting some of these experiences, we're able to show a more biblical account of how people can relate to their experiences. And I think that this is just a great tool for the church. And it's not something that's unique to what we're doing, but I think we do it best.
Man, that was beautiful. It's almost like an introduction to a book. Really well said. Yeah, I also want to say that I chose confettis as the background for today, but the stories that we'll be reading will not be funny, will not be, most of them are not positive, most of them are scary, and there's always something happening in behind, something nefarious, something in the background that is creeping and attacking people because the enemy of our souls hates our souls. Being made in God's image, there's something that he or them as a horde of whatever nefarious beings are out there, they have something personal against us. So that being said, we can start with the first story for tonight, and all these stories are publicly available. It's public domain. The first one is and they don't have stories, so I'll go with the first one. And again, we'll be reading and commenting. Okay. So it says, I'm from Scotland. When I was just a child, my mom and dad took my sister and I to a trip to Fort William, which is a town up in the Highlands. People go there for skiing and hiking. It wasn't winter, so we were there to do some easy hiking. My sister and I were very young. I was about 11, and we were staying there for a couple of nights. I can't remember the name of the hotel we stayed at, but I do remember that it was a bit old fashioned and we were all in one room together. It was a single bed where I was sleeping, a double bed in the middle, my parents were there, and another single on the other side, which was my sister's. I was often frightened when I was a girl. I didn't like the dark, and I was super scared of the possibility of ghosts and similar creatures. I never found it easy to sleep because of this, even at home. I vividly remember tossing and turning the first night in the hotel for a long time before lying on my back and trying to calm myself down. I then felt the bed sink a little next to my feet. Okay, this is where the things are getting serious. So she felt a presence, some weight on her bed. I heard the creak of the old mattress. Someone was sitting at the foot of my bed. My heart was honestly pounding. I hadn't heard my sister or parents get up, so I was terrified. Okay, before I continue, Sean, what would be your first reaction? Would you be like continue laying down, or you'd be like just kick the the blanket and just get up and turn on the light, or like even run through the room if you would be a younger version of yourself?
Oh, I if I was a younger version of myself, I would have ran to my parents' bedroom, but obviously the parents are there. Um, yeah, I mean that's such a creepy experience, feeling like the weight of somebody sitting on your bed. I mean, I think we've all kind of felt that we wake up and something kind of feels a little different, and then you finally come to, and you're fully awake, and you can, oh, okay, well that was probably just a dream, or I was moving around half asleep. But to wake up and oh no, it's still there, that would be creepy.
For sure, and also what? Well, this thing triggers my next question. How is a spiritual entity even having weight to be able to sit on a bed and make the bed gets down so you can actually see the line? Like it's like almost a real human person, or an animal entity that has real weight and can sit down and uh, just act like a human being even though it's invisible. So it's not a doppelganger, it's not a visible entity, it's a spirit that still, it seems to at least, chooses to obey the laws of physics in this way, that when it sits on the bed, you can still see it change, the mattress is changing. So like you can say even from the distance there's someone there, but I cannot tell who or what. So have you ever thought like how is this even possible?
Yeah. So for me, something that I try to think about is in the Bible, how does it describe spirits? And when we're thinking about like an angel, for example, whenever they show up, they're always embodied. And so the idea for me is that a spirit is not something that is incapable of manifesting physical reality. It's something that isn't bound by our physical limitations. And so I tend to think of it as something that is that can have a physical form and can interact with our reality, but isn't forced to, right? So if you imagine something that's like a two-dimensional drawing, and you draw little squares and you have a little house there, and if you were a two-dimensional creature, you couldn't go through the walls of the house because that's a barrier. But a three-dimensional creature can look at the house, everything within it, and the outside of the house, and move his finger from in the house to out of the house without ever crossing through the boundary. And if we think of spirits in that way, it could be a very real physical being that isn't bound to the laws of our spatial reality, and so can pass through what seems to be an impermeable barrier without giving up their physicality. And so I think that the idea that a spirit is something that's just kind of gaseous or vaporous, or is something that is just like an illusion, like it's like an artifact of light or an artifact of the mind that just kind of appears but has no substantial reality. I think that was kind of just a way for the 20th century mind to grasp what was going on, but I don't think it lines up with what we have in the Bible. So I would say that they're totally capable of interacting with the physical world.
Yeah, but it seems like and we cover this in a number of stories. um they seem to be at will change not just their shape but also their the way they would portray themselves to humans. They can be completely invisible, or they can show to, they can choose to be shown in flesh. Like I had this guy several months ago. He came and the whole episode, like almost hour and a half, was him telling the story what he experienced with his friends when they were children. So he saw something that was chasing them in the building that looked like a dog man. And when the train showed in, and the creature heard the train, the sound of the train, look back at the kids, and then start running away from kids to escape. And it just suddenly disappeared in the air. It didn't even jump from the building. So I'm like, from all these cases, and of course, we don't know everything exactly what happened. We're just open minded, but we don't trust blindly. We just love these mysterious stories. I'm just led to think like, or like with stories with Bigfoot, like they can choose to show themselves or completely to camouflage themselves. And there's so many different species with these spiritual beings. Like it's not just one or two, and the Bible doesn't speak necessarily about this. But this is why when we speak, when we talk to people and read their eyewitness accounts, and of course, unless there is a reason to doubt their sanity or their reason, if there's something that would show them not to be credible witnesses. But there's so many common stories throughout the world. Whenever people are witnessing cryptids and these spiritual stories, first, again, they can be visible or invisible. Second thing, we like there's so many different kinds of, and sometimes we don't even know if one creature can manifest itself as a different being to different people, but it can be the same entity with the same identity. but to people it can show itself as a different creature, which reminds me of the ancient mythologies and religions like okay, Baal is understood by scholars to be the same thing as Zeus and to be the same as whatever. So if it's the same creature, the same entity that show itself by different names to different religion, that creature does not care how it's called. What it cares to receive glory and honor instead that belongs to Yahweh. And Jesus, it wants all the glory and attention to itself. So I think there's something in all that spiritual structure. I think there's a commonality between all these beings. There's like a pyramid who is more powerful and whatnot, but they share some of the characteristics and attributes. Besides being rebellious from God, it's also this. At least it seems like they can change names or like the outward appearance, but sometimes it's the same thing that people in different cultures would call with different names. Did you notice some similarity also like that, or just me?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have like the Roman deities that were basically the Greek deities with Roman names. And then when Tacitus came to or went to Germany, he listed the gods that they had and was like, well, here's the Roman equivalent. So I mean, yeah, the idea that these beings would just be called by different names or have kind of the same MO is I mean, I think that's really well established. Another thing that we would have to think about is, we're really aliens to the spiritual world, and if you were to take, say, an alien from a foreign planet and were to bring them here, and we're trying to teach them the difference between creatures, like say, for example, you had a German Shepherd, and you were going to teach it the difference between that and a coyote, or those two and a wolf. They all look very similar. And it's just small distinctions that would tell you the difference. Now, we who live here, we can pretty well tell. But if they're like, okay, so what's the difference? They're brown. Yeah, they're all brown. They have pointy ears. They all do. They have a long, fluffy tail. Yep. So what are the marks that we're looking for? Because one of them is nice and the other two will rip you apart. Uh, so looking at things in the spiritual world, just because they have characteristics that overlap doesn't necessarily make them the same entity.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you. Okay, let's go back to the stories. I like how sometimes we go to these rabbit trails. That's one of the best parts of these horror stories. So the girl felt scared because she felt presence as someone sitting by her feet. Whatever was sitting there quickly moved, so it was sitting on my feet. So first it was sitting by her feet, now it was sitting on her feet. I'll be freaking out. I felt the weight of whatever it was. I heard the mattress creak again. My feet were freezing cold. It then moved off my feet and settled down next to them again. The old mattress shifted and creaked again. Within a second or two, I felt the coldest I've ever felt, but not throughout my whole body. The coldness was slowly rising up from my feet, accompanied by a feeling of pressure. Shaun, this is also another very, very common thing that there will be a presence of demonic powers. And when I say demonic powers, I don't mean just demons. Any nefarious entity out there, there will be usually this cold present. There's something about them that they bring death, they bring destruction, they bring fear, and fear is paralyzed. When you feel scared, especially if you're trembling, you don't usually feel hot. You usually feel like cold. I even want to cover myself more. There's something about not just coldness, but fear that brings extra layer of coldness. So she was feeling cold right at the feet where that entity was sitting by, and she said that coldness was then spreading from her legs through her whole body. So I'm like, what is it about coldness, about cold air that these entities bring with them? Why is it cool air in a building where I don't want to mention names and I don't want to mention locations, but in a building where I was before, there was this guy who was a work acquaintance, and he was doing me a lot of favors, and we were just chatting about many different things, and he was telling me about this place where if you go to their basement, he said he felt this sudden rush of cold air, and the guy's like, I don't even know if he believes in supernatural. He just told me that when he went there in their basement or sub basement, something like that, of that building, he felt like that. So I was like, okay, now like we were talking with this guy. So it was my friend and him. So three of us. So I said, listen, there are three of us now. Let's go and investigate. This was like a year or 2 years ago. To me, this was so fun. Like let us go and investigate. He was like, no, man, I'm not going there back again. I'm like, why not? It's three of us. What can happen to you? It's like, you'll be fine. He says, no, you don't understand. Once when you go through something like that, you don't want to go and experience again. He said, no. And he's not some scared guy in general. And again, he's not the guy that you hear about him, some supernatural stuff. He's very like, very common sense, very logic, very like arguments, give me, reason for this and that. So it's like, dang it, like there is something that even people who don't believe in these things, and they can be skeptics, agnostics in general, when it comes to so many different areas, including being religious, but like that made me think that like there is something that this guy experienced that was legit. And of course, me being myself, I'm like, let me go. And I went with a friend to this place. We went underground, and I told him, wait by the door. So I brought the flashlight and I was investigating. I was like, I hope I won't see or notice anything scary, but I was still like curious. I wanted to go and see myself, and I didn't. There was no sudden rush of cold air the same way that this guy experienced. So sometimes I'm thinking, well, first, why the cold air? There's something about that. Is it just because these spirits are lifeless, so they bring death? But I'm also thinking, could it be that sometimes the reason why you may experience something and I may not, even though we're maybe at the same location and facing the same thing, could it be also that sometimes we may be doing something in our lives, or we may be bringing something from our lives that can be attached or attract certain spirit that can provoke that spirit, that they can come and manifest in our lives, but not in other lives. So maybe if you want to comment briefly on those two things, like cool air, and like, could it be that sometimes some people experience something because of something in their lives, and other people like, yeah, I didn't see nothing.
Yeah, so cool air. So the paranormal investigators theorize that the cold air is the spirit. In order to manifest, it is taking energy from the environment, and so that's the reason that you'll have batteries die. That's the reason that it's taking thermal energy out of the air. It'll take body heat energy from the people around them. And so in order to be able to transition into our reality, it has to pull energy from our environment. I don't know. It seems like that's a pretty scientific understanding of like how things work and how something would get energy. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I think it's as good of an explanation as any. As far as people who experience these things, whether or not they have certain predispositions based on their life, I would say absolutely, right? Like if you are a born again Christian and you are walking in close relationship to the Lord and you are keeping short accounts with God, there's nothing that they can use to afflict you because you're completely covered by blessing, right? There's no sin in your life that they can use to get a legal access to you. So they don't have this sort of easement that they can leverage in order to be able to afflict you. Whereas if you're somebody who's living according to the world, then they have full access to you because you're not receiving your pleasure and benefit from the Lord. You're receiving it from them or from them. How will you receive good from their hand but not bad, right? That's just kind of who they are and what they do. You're part of their world. So yeah, I would say it's definitely comes down to the individual.
And that brings me to this conclusion, which is now theological. That's another reason why we should confess our sins to God. Yeah, it can be very convicting. It can be very embarrassing. Oh God, it's me again with my sin that I committed for the thousandth time. But like you said, there's something legal when you confess it to the Lord. Then the enemy, even though he or it can whisper in your ear, all you did is you're like, yeah, I know, and God knows too, and I confess it to Him. So for me now, when you're speaking, I'm just thinking like, yeah, that would be another great reason to confess in sins, not just to be forgiven, not just to be cleansed and restored in relationship with God, but also that like that sin, particular sin or addiction or whatever, cannot be abused against you. So that was good. Okay, I'm almost done. I was too scared to open my eyes. I was willing myself to call for my mom, but I was too scared that I just couldn't at first. When I managed to shout out and wake the rest of my family, the cold, pressured feeling had reached up to my knees. When the lights were switched on, the feeling vanished. I have no explanation for this whole situation. Sorry. My dad slept in that bed the next night, and I stayed awake the whole night in the double with my mom. Yeah, this is a very short and very interesting story. It's short, but we made it longer with our discussions, and that's the best thing of these episodes. But yeah, like it's interesting how you turn the light and the darkness is afraid, even of the natural light, or even of the light that is. I mean, light bulbs are not natural light, but still, even any sort of light can disperse the darkness. So I'm thinking, but if for Jesus being the light, the enemy, of course, is afraid of. But like, what is it? Is that later translated in the stories of, demons and vampires being afraid of the sun? And now we see even through electricity and light bulbs that they suddenly disappear. Like it would seem like they hate anything that is made of pure energy than them. So maybe it's not just about light itself, but maybe what is light made of. I'm just hypothesizing while I'm just talking to you. Have you ever thought about this phenomena? You're muted, Shaun. You're muted.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yeah, and it doesn't always necessarily work, right? Like, we have instances where people encounter the spiritual or a spiritual attack, even in the daylight time. So I don't know if it's something about light, but I think it's a good metaphor. I wonder if what actually caused the spiritual attack to stop was the fact that mom and dad were awake, because I have this belief that a family is a covenant, and the covenant head of the family is the father and the mother. And so a spirit can't actually get access to a child without going through mom and dad. When mom and dad are awake and they're up and they're aware and their instincts are kicking in and they're looking out for the protection of their children, all of a sudden that's a barrier that this spirit can no longer access the child. It's kind of like taking dominion over your house. You could have a rebellious child, but when you lay down the law and you're like, this is what we do in this house, all of a sudden any sort of spiritual affliction stops because of your discipline. And that's kind of like a metaphor for how God disciplines us within the church. Is you might be engaged in something, but He's going to bring in His discipline in order to cut off that wickedness, that you would be walking in righteousness. And so I wonder if it's the fact that mom and dad are awake, they are now going into protective mode, and the spirit no longer has access to the child, and so it just vanishes.
Okay, I have a question that is relatable to that question. But what can people who are not walking with God, even if they're awake, what can they do to protect their child against the spirit? Again, if they're not people of God, they won't pray, they don't have the authority in Christ. Like what they can't, like why would the spirit back down? That's my question. Like I'm confused. Why would the spirit back down just because parents are awake? If parents are not praying, if they're like agnostics or atheists or whatever, like there's no way they will be able to fight an invisible enemy.
Because the family covenant is not a product of the church, it's an institution established by God. And so it's not necessarily that they're doing the right things, it's that the family government that God established works. And so In the same way that in the same way that like a mother lion doesn't need to be a Christian to keep her cubs safe from a hyena, right? Like she's going to come to the rescue, and that's going to be the end of that. It's the same thing for unbelieving and pagan parents. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't have some sort of spiritual infestation that's so bad that it's going after mom and dad and all the kids. At that point, you really need to examine your life, repent, and believe the gospel, because you're in over your head.
Thank you. Okay, we spent like 30 minutes on a short story. We never had that, but so much fun. Okay, the next one is a very short story. You want to go with it?
All right. All right. I had a recurring scary dream. In it, I was at my grandparents' farmhouse, which was over 200 years old. I was dressed in Victorian clothes and in the fields and walking down a strange path, but it felt like I had been there many, many times. I walked through the woods and eventually came to a cabin. I felt eerie, like a presence of death. Or I'm sorry, it felt eerie, like a presence of death. I opened the door, and there was death all around me. Cries of children filled the air. I had this dream for months. I eventually ended up visiting my grandparents on spring break or something, and decided to follow my dream's path. I ended up at a cabin. It looked exactly like in my dream. I was terrified. I called my friend to try to shake my fear and cautiously open the door. The, there was a burned car seat and burned children's toys scattered around the ground. I felt an awful sense of dread and backed up slowly while trying to catch my breath. I've since tried to look up missing children in the area and have found nothing. I have no idea what it means, but as soon as I found the cabin, the dream stopped.
Okay, I'll say what I think, but what is your interpretation? Even though we like data, it's a short story, but man, it's such a actually it's a very sad and mysterious story. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts would be that I think that it was probably some kids messing around and trying to summon a demon or something. Um, and, had a burnt car seat and some toys um, in like an abandoned cabin. And I think that there was something that had happened in that area that was, it kind of had a gravity of its own, and it was pulling her conscious towards it. And so when she got there, it was kind of like, that's what it is. Um, but I think that that was just, it was a sense of closure for her. But I don't necessarily think that whatever was summoned there had necessarily gone away. What do you think?
See, because that last part, she didn't find any info about missing kids. That's troubling me. If she didn't do her mission, which was, let's say, there was a cry from a um, let's say from a missing child. I don't want to use any harsh word or assume what happened to them, but if there was if there were children, at least one, and if there was somehow a connection through a dream or telepathically through the spirit or ghost of a missing child to this person, and if she found a cabin and then it stopped, I would assume, well, then her mission was to tell the world, so then it would be exposed. But then she said, oh, I was googling or I was researching, I was asking around, and I didn't find any missing children. So I'm like, well, then why did the dream stop? Like, it would seem like you did what you're supposed to do, but then if there were no missing children, I'm thinking, well, maybe there are no missing children found yet. Because sometimes even you told me that you studied criminal justice, right? We know this from these mystery movies with serial killers. Sometimes half a decade later, they found bones of missing people in someone's basement or buried in the backyard or whatnot. So I'm just hoping, because I love children, I'm just hoping that there was no like kids abduction of or someone molesting them or God forbid taking their lives. But there's almost that thread that is invisible that to me it almost makes sense because it unifies the whole story. I will hope that's not true because she said with nothing found yet, but I'm like, why was this burned in a cabin? Like, yeah, it could have been a mistake, it could have been an accident, but it's also like, I hope there's nothing somewhere deep in the ground buried that will be like, you know, and their spirit is like crying out for justice. Like, we want, this to be exposed. This was the thing that just went through my mind, and I'm hoping it's not true. I'm hoping like, oh, it was just like someone was playing it, maybe even a prank. I don't know, but I'm just hoping I'm not correct.
Well, and so the better story than what I think it would be that you know there was a child that was kidnapped and was killed in the cabin, and then it's a 200-year-old house, so the spirits that are present in the area saw this terrible thing and were doing what they could to communicate. So when she saw herself in this Victorian dress, it was the spirit putting her in her own eyes and taking her to see what had happened. That would make for a better story. Uh, I mean, it would be a great movie, but I don't necessarily know if the facts all line up. Now, one thing I would question is she said there were no missing children. Uh, Maybe not from that little tiny area, but there are missing children all the time. Um, there's always missing children. So, it's unfortunate in the society we live in, but yeah, that is an ongoing problem.
Yeah. Okay, that was a good conclusion. Next story is honestly maybe even the saddest story in all the stories we prepare for tonight. Not the scariest story, but the saddest one. This story is about an uncle of mine. He was a nice man with a loving family, and he worked as a Muslim missionary where he traveled the world and talked about Islam, correcting people's misunderstandings. He was not an extremist, but corrected the extremists themselves. He loved to travel as well as heard about, I'm sorry, he loved to travel as well and heard about a village in Malaysia who apparently practiced a lot of black magic and cursed people using demons. I know it sounds weird, but I wouldn't have trusted the story as well if it wasn't in the family. Okay, so this story was circulating in the family, it wasn't just invented. So her uncle decided that these people are causing problems for their neighbors, and it would be better to go and talk to them about Islam. He went, even after some efforts for him not to meddle in something like that. Okay, this was not the best put sentence, but basically he went to Malaysia to do his missionary work. However, he was determined to help these people from at least stop cursing others. He went to the village and camped around for 10 days, trying to convince people, but it was to no worth. They didn't listen, and they even attempted to kill him or quote unquote sacrifice him for the greater good of the village. So naturally, he came back. This all happened roughly 2 months ago. He came back to his normal life, but would feel weird. He started hearing voices, cries, and screams. According to his family, he couldn't have been left alone because he would try to fight the voices and throwing things. His family was very patient with him, but after 1 month exactly, he could hear someone call his name for any corner in the room, and he eventually hung himself. I don't know what happened, but we are sure he was cursed badly. Sorry for the long post, and I realize it is not nearly as scary as the other post, but I think it's still scary enough to know that there are people who will curse you to death. Okay, this is why I said this is one of the saddest stories. When I was reading it last night, I was like, first, I didn't even know that Muslims have missionaries. Second thing, this is spiritual warfare 101. We hear this from Christian, missionaries who go to usually Africa and Asia, and Malaysia is, of course, in Asia. We hear about these things. We hear about territorial principalities who hold their position, their territory strategically, and will be jealous of it. Like, this is mine. You're not coming here. But then Christians will go and proclaim this territory by preaching the gospel and rebuking these entities in the name of Jesus. Now, this poor Muslim guy, I believe he had just the best intentions to go and bring peace, in this society. But their magic was so powerful. When they cursed him, he came back and he was carrying this with himself, and he eventually hung himself. Now, that latter part of the story, Shaun, I don't know why, but reminds me of that phenomenon called the hitchhiker's effect. Could it be that because he witnessed demons and gods of these eras, that he unknowingly, somehow, they attached to him, he brought them home, and they were driving him nuts, so that he started as a same person. He was saying his whole life. Now he started hearing voices, having all these negative thoughts, start hearing his name wherever in the room, and there will be no one there. And then he hung himself after 1 month returning from Malaysia. I think it's, even though it's a short story, it's packed theologically and spiritual, with like being said that someone lost their life even though they had good intentions. Second thing, I wish he had epiphany to call in the name of Jesus, because he would be ended up being victorious and being alive. Third, and this is not about my religion is better than your religion. This has nothing to do with it. Third thing, there is something that attached to himself, just the same thing with the Skinwalker Ranch, that people swear like they will go and visit. When they will go back home, something bad will necessarily happen to them and their families. So it's like a combo of so many things that is like so sad, and unfortunately it ends up in the most miserable and saddest way, that this person, because he dared to go in Malaysia and help people, this demonic entity, principality, attached itself, or maybe sent one of its minions to follow this guy because it was jealous. Like, how do you dare and come in my territory? To the point of driving him nuts and committing suicide. Such a sad story. I just wish he was able to call the name of Jesus. Okay, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as the hitchhiker effect, yeah, I mean, it does happen. People go to these places. Typically, it is not going to places and just being a good citizen, walking around, and then you take something home with you. Typically, the hitchhiker effect is when you are communicating with spirits. So you normally won't get a hitchhike. Like, you go to a graveyard and visit your parents or grandparents that are buried, and you're not going to be in any danger of leaving with a spirit. But if you go there with an EMF meter and you want to communicate with the dead, you better believe you stand a chance of leaving with the spirit, right? Because you are doing something that we are commanded not to do. So you are intentionally stepping outside of what God has commanded us, not to speak with the dead. Why would you expect him to protect you when the protection he gave you was telling you what not to do, right? If I tell a child not to touch a stove and he touches a stove, no amount of love that I have for him will protect him from getting burned, because my love was in instituting the law, don't touch the stove. Secondly, yeah, I wish that this person, because he sounds like a person with a great heart, I wish this person would have been able to call out to the name of Jesus, the true Jesus, right? Not the Muslim Jesus, that's just a prophet, but the true King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I wish he would have been able to call out to him, because at the name of Jesus, all of the dark and shadowy things of this world will scatter, right? Because every knee will bow to Christ. But he didn't. I personally don't think that this person had a hitchhiker. I think I agree with the author. I think that they were cursed, because what had happened really lines up with some of the curses that we see from other cultures too, where you're basically just driven mad, and it's not the curse isn't what kills you, it's that it breaks down your mind and then you kill yourself. Because if it kills you, then you're a martyr. But if you kill yourself, then the last act that you committed as a human was murder, right? So that way they're insured, they're going to get your soul.
Years ago, I heard this story, and unfortunately, because I read and listen a lot, I forget details. But there was this pastor in another of these, countries where Christianity is not prevalent. Let's say it was like one of those Caribbean countries where voodoo is prevalent, right? I think it was something like that. And he was going there to do a missionary work, and he was warned, do not go to that man's house because there's a powerful shaman, the powerful witch person, male, who can curse you. Do not go and play with him. Now, of course, as a person of faith, you don't boast in yourself. It's not about arrogance, but it's just about knowing your authority and position in Christ. So knowing that and being willing to go and preach the gospel to the person, he went there, and this witch doctor cursed him, and the pastor died. And I was never able to understand all these years, like, God, but you're supposed to protect us. Like, could it be that this pastor went there against God's permission? Because otherwise, how could a curse kill pastor, missionary, man of faith who had just the best intention for this witch doctor to tell him to stop with magic and turn to Christ? So I would expect God, maybe naively, I would expect God in that situation to 100% protect us. But this pastor died from a curse, and I was never able to provide myself some good enough answer. I don't know if you have anything to say on this. If not, we can skip.
Yeah, sometimes the best and most loving thing that God can do is not to protect you, right? I mean, the apostles almost to a man all died, right? They were all martyred, so they were killed. Maybe there was a display of courage and trust in God that these people needed to see, right? They were certain that if you go and do this thing, that you will die. And they needed to see a Christian who wasn't afraid. Like, I mean, what did he lose, really, right? I mean, for me to live as Christ and to die as gain. So it's not inconceivable. In fact, it's very much in line with the roots of our faith that we would go out preaching the message of Christ against anything that dares to stand up against the gospel. We would preach the message of Christ. And if we die, we win. What are you going to do? You can't take away my inheritance, right? So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the next story is yours about the monk in Thailand. And be patient with this text because this guy from Thailand wrote this. It's the grammar is bad, sentences are bad. I was trying to fix the whole text last night, and I did a decent, work, but there's still tenses mixed. There's still incomplete sentences. So just, whatever you see, just read or maybe form in your own way because it's a difficult text to read. So just heads up.
Okay. I would like to share a story about the time when I was a monk in Thailand 2 years ago. It is a culture thing where men older than 20 years old would participate in ordination as a monk, usually 1 to 3 months, but nowadays it is only for ceremony's sake and you only do it for a week. As for me, I chose not to do it to repent and repay my parents for the taking of me. So I chose 1 month because I have to go back to university afterwards. First night as a monk will be the one I will remember to this day. It was a very fortuitous day, and there are 6 participants in the ordination, including me. The ceremony went well, and we learned etiquette and mantra in the afternoon. At night, the elder monk, who were assigned to help us, asked if we were afraid of ghosts. Well, to be fair, none of us have ever seen one, and we are in the temple as a monk. What is there to be afraid of, right? Furthermore, there is no cemetery or crematorium in the temple. We are safe and we are in Bangkok, which is a big city. Me and 2 other monks were assigned a room with open window on the second story of the monastery. Nothing is wrong with it except the ceiling has a hole in it, or has many big holes in the gypsum, and all we see is pitch black holes. Well, plus there are many small Buddha statues on the wall. I'm sorry, statues on the window border. And why did they put them there and not on the altar? We all ask the same question. Thai horror film has these kind of setups a lot. We tend to drop the topic. Fast forward into the night. After evening prayers, we all separated and headed back to our rooms. We pick a mat and started to sleep and conserve our strength since we didn't eat after noon and we had to wake up early to pray and walk around town asking for food. I had to walk to my house and back to the temple, which is around 6 kilometers barefoot. So it was time to sleep. I picked a middle mat and put my head down toward the window. The marble floor was very hard to sleep on, even with a mat, but I was too tired to protest. I fell asleep after some time, and then suddenly I felt a pain in my neck. The cushion is so hard, was too hard, so I rolled over. Now I'm half awake. I can hear the clock ticking, but my eyes remain closed. I hear no breathing sound from my roommate, just silence. Everything is fine. Let's go back to sleep. Suddenly, I heard a loud bird crying in the distance. The sound is so hoarse and very unpleasant. It is very loud in the silent night, but you don't know what bird it is. I don't recognize the sound. Then a dog started to howl. There are lots of dogs in the temple. The dog the dog was howling from the other end of the temple, which is the dock. And just like a domino effect, every dog started to howl like mad. The feeling, it became heavy, and I was so tired. My eyelids were so heavy because I was afraid of the darkness in the ceiling above my head. Suddenly, the feeling was heavy, and I was so tired. My eyelids were so heavy, but I was afraid of the darkness in the ceiling above my head. Then suddenly, the howling ended. I opened my eyes slowly. There was nothing in the ceiling. Why would I risk opening my eyes, to be honest? But what followed is the most agonizing thing ever. The wind started blowing, and here came a long wheezing sound from the distance. But the sound came closer and closer, and I could hear it so clearly. It isn't a whistle, but a sound of wind blowing outside of something very small. And then he heard that wheezing sound again. My eyes remained shut, and the wheezing just stopped right above my head, outside of the window, which was outside of the window above me. So above his head, out of the window. It continued forever, but my body became numb and I forgot to breathe until I fell asleep due to exhaustion. I don't know when the sound stopped, but in the morning I shared what I had heard to my roommate. The thing is, they were awake last night as well, but they only heard the bird and the dog, and they didn't say that, and they said that they turned to look at me and my body was stiffened almost as if I was frozen, but they couldn't hear the wheezing sound, the howling in the night. I asked the elder monk about this, and he said that it could be one of the apparitions with a big body, big hand, but a very small mouth, as small as a needle hole. It is one of the punishments for sinners who lie a lot, something like that. It probably came to ask some merits, and I should give it and forgive it for frightening me. I also heard the same sound 3 or 4 nights later, but faintly and far away, not outside my window, and I slept peacefully.
Man, such a bizarre story. What do
Yeah,
you think
yeah,
about it?
you know, I, some of these these Asian cryptids are just, they're so weird to Western minds, right? Like
Just
we
like
can
anime
understand.
and manga.
Right. Like, I mean, there's just like they have all different kinds of weird cryptids that have all different kinds of really weird features. and I guess in their culture, it makes just as much sense as like a Western person seeing like a ghost in tattered clothes with chains hanging from their arms. Like we would all look at that and be like, oh, that's terrifying, but it makes sense. And I'm sure that they're thinking the same thing. If you have this giant, looks like Big Hero 6 and a little tiny hole for a mouth, and they're like, yeah, that makes sense to them. That's it's crazy. So what do you think about the idea of a ghost coming to try to get merits? Like, what do you think about that? Like, do you think that's like a monk term or what?
Well, do we understand merits exclusively as like doing something good? So it seemed to me, unless I misunderstood, that almost like the spirit, the ghost came trade the sinfulness of this young monk. If he would give him something in return, then like, dude, then I'll leave you alone. Otherwise, I'll be coming back and I'll scare you. Just like it's like one of those religions and beliefs where you atone for your own sins. If you do something good, then you're like, just leave me alone. It's And then why did the ghost even look like that, or the spirit? Would it be sent by God to torture you like that? It wouldn't be. But then if it's not sent by God, why would it be trying to correct you not to lie? It's like it's such a weird combo of all these things, and I never heard that a spirit like that will be sent, to like encourage you to do something well. And also, like, how does even this spirit has the access in a temple? So we're talking about different religion, right? We're talking about, was it Buddhism or Hinduism? I forgot. Let me see. Well, he didn't specify. He says a monk in Thailand. So, Buddha. Okay, they're Buddha statues. So it was a Buddhist, monastery. So I'm like thinking, like, well, if this is supposed to be a holy place, how come it's not protected by Buddha spirit or whoever spirit? How come it's not protected against these spirits? Like, it's such a story that seems fun from the outside, but doesn't seem to be telling the whole story. Like some details are missing. And like, if you became a monk, why did you stop being a monk? Was it because of that scary like experience? And what? For me, the most bizarre thing is like, one, how come the temple, if it's such a sacred space, was not protected? And number two is like, what ghost in the world comes to trade? You've been sinning because you've been lying. So where if you do some merits, like then we'll trade merits for sin. It almost reminds me why Luther even wanted to start Reformation. It's like paying like for coins, paying coins for your sins, so that you can even absolve not just your own sins, but even for your dead ancestors. It's like, it doesn't work that way. So many bizarre things.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think you're dead on. I was just trying to understand merit. Like, was that is that like he's trying to get your meal ticket or something? Like, man. But yeah, no. I mean, it seems like such a contrived religion. Like it doesn't seem to necessarily be based on anything that we really experience. It's just kind of, it's the whole thing kind of seems made up. But I guess they would probably say the same thing about ours. So,
well, no, I believe this story. Just like, I wish there are more answers. It's like with most of these stories, like, but the same thing happens with horror movies. Most of these horror movies have unsatisfying ending. Like, there's so many questions, and the authors of these movies or creepy TV shows or novels, they leave you usually with unfinished ending. Like, you can portray your own ending, you can imagine your ending, or you can come up with your own conclusion. And I don't like that. I like when the story goes from A to Z and it has all these details, but that's not always in life. So it's like we don't always get a closure. So I believe, like, why would he lie? But again, it's just that I have questions.
Yeah, I believe what you said. I just don't believe Buddhism.
Okay, yeah, that would be a different thing. So the next story is a creepy one. I own a closet that is huge and is mainly two big mirrors that you can slide left to right with a wood structure inside the drawers. Let me guess, this is a female. Okay, just say, because no guy would keep all of this in his closet. This closet is where I keep my clothes at the moment, and it's been around for more than 13 years. Years ago, I used to own a very small and old Sony TV that fit perfectly inside the closet, and I used it almost every day. This one time, I came home from a party and I sat down and started taking off my shoes, and I could hear static coming from inside the closet, like someone was messing with my TV and left it on a bad channel. As I'm looking up straight to where the noise was coming from, someone or something punched the closet from the inside, and this was a strong and loud punch to the right closet door. And then she explains the closet had both doors closed at the moment. So I just froze to death, and I couldn't believe this crap seriously. So I froze to death, full on goosebumps, and stared at the closet for at least 10 minutes before deciding to go towards it. Okay, so she was in shock. I just wish she would share that with someone of her roommates or family members if she was so much scared. I got real close to the right door and for some reason just tried hearing whatever was going on inside my closet. And boom, another punch, like a legit punch, almost like someone from the inside even knew that I was standing right there. I would say, well, yeah, the spirits know your presence. I opened the door and nothing. Everything was fine. I wanted to believe that somehow a drawer slided out and hit the door and then went back to its place somehow twice. So she was so paralyzed and so scared that she was willing to give it herself a logical answer so that she wouldn't be afraid. And I understand that. I understand that. So I slided the door and move on the next weird thing, which is my small TV in the same closet that was on making a bunch of noise. So I took the remote and I slided the door, sat on my bed, and looked at the TV for a moment. And there it was, the channel 666 on TV. I'm not even kidding. I've been an atheist all my life, just like my father. I don't believe in this kind of crap. But there it was. You know what's crazy? I switched channels and noticed that my small Sony TV could not even go higher than 99. Even with the remote, you could try to put channel 666 and it was always channel 99. It's like I will first tell her, lady, get rid of that closet. It's possessed. Like whatever it is, it's not a TV. It's whatever it's that little area of your room that entity wants it claimed for itself. Because first it was banging from the inside. You open the door. I mean, two drawers sliding. If your closet or your drawers were not tilted, they wouldn't be just coming in and out. That's not how closet work. So it's like it happened two times and then your TV switched to channel 666, which is by default, by factory settings, impossible to go over 99 because these are the old TVs. So it's like this will tell me it's not a TV. It's that whole section that you will need to bring a priest or a pastor, pray over, whatever. If you want to scream at it, plead the blood of Jesus, bring the holy water, bring all the guns in. It can't hurt even if it's not in the Bible, but it's not sinful. But I think there was that section of her apartment that the entity wanted to like feel like this is his home, this is his presence. The entity wants to claim it for itself, and now scare the person, the living being, the human being who is living there, to scare it away. Like this is mine now. It's like it's fighting for a territory. At least that's how it sounds to me. And was using all these tricks to scare the poor girl. And unfortunately, we don't know what's happening after that because dude, if this was happening one night, just one night, all those punches from the inside of the empty closet, and then the TV switched to 666, God knows what was happening after that. But she didn't continue the story. This was a post from years ago. But I definitely think that maybe not the whole house or apartment, but I think that definitely her room was haunted.
So there's an interesting phrase in here. It says, "I've been an atheist all my life, just like my father." Now, and if you were someone who's skeptical, you would use the word skeptic, Right? I've been a skeptic all my life, like my father. She uses the word atheist, which means she doesn't believe in God, and she believes that she can live her life however she wants, and there won't be consequences. Enter consequences, right? Uh, she she decided to live her life however she wanted, and now there's a legal right that some spirit has. It's not infesting her wardrobe or her closet. It's in her life. She could get rid of all of that. It's not going to change anything because the spirit isn't like an animal. It's not fighting over physical territory because it has no need for physical territory. What it's fighting over is people, and she is she's reaping the consequences of her life. I don't know anything about her other than she chose to use the word atheist, which tells me everything I need to know in that situation. I can live my life however I want. God doesn't have a right to tell me what to do. Okay, have fun.
Yeah, that's it. And by the way, when we analyze these stories, it's never our pleasure to see other people suffering or going through these things. We just wish more people would be open to calling upon the name of the Lord. And sometimes when I watch different YouTube channels, their testimonies, or sometimes in under one video there are like thousands of comments from people around the world. Sometimes I would read testimonies from Muslims or people of other religions or atheists who will say, "Hey, something scary happened to me, and I didn't know what to do, so I just say Jesus, and boom, everything stopped, and I became Christian after that experience." I'm like, yes. So I marvel with that. It's not our intention or desire or laugh, haha, you're silly, oh, you're stupid. No, that's not our intention on this podcast. It's always like to bring comfort, truth, reconciliation to God the Father through Jesus Christ, and to bring healing, spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, to people by speaking the truth. And the truth is always gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Shaun, you just happen to have a very short story. It's one paragraph.
All right. Not my experience, but my dad's. He is a nurse, so he has told me some pretty scary stories. Probably one of his scariest was when this one guy was dying from liver failure because he was a drunk his entire life. So there wasn't anything anybody could do except wait. Now, this guy was a hardcore atheist, according to my dad, and was not shy in making it known. So when the guy began to pass away, suddenly he gripped the sides of the bed really tight and his eyes got really wide, like, oh crap, kind of wide. And he started yelling, "Don't let them take me," over and over again. My dad said even after he was dead, they had a hard time getting his hands to unclutch the sides of the bed. Yeah.
Ooh, this is sad and scary. Whoever or whatever was coming after this poor guy, the former drunkard, was not an angel of light, was not a God sent angel, was not to bring comfort. It was to terrify him and torture him even after his death. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I really hope there is a post-mortem salvation opportunity for people, but you just can't rely on that. You just don't know. You don't know. Like, don't play with God. Like, don't do it. And we're not saying that because we're overly holy and overly religious. I know I'm not. I like so many things in my devotional life with God, but it's like, don't play with your life. You just have it one. Just like, man, imagine. Forget his whole life, if whatever bad decision he made, whatever sin he committed before God, we all do. But imagine the sadness of a guy who's like holding on his bed so tightly because he's scared of these claws coming after him, and he's telling to a nurse, like, "Please save me, protect me from them. Don't allow them to come after me." Someone can say, "Well, he was probably still intoxicated. He didn't know what he was seeing." But I feel this is real because in the meantime, while you're admitted to the hospital, that alcohol doesn't stay in you for weeks and months. It doesn't stay for that long. The poor guy had a vision of something coming after him, which I spoke with this acquaintance of mine, and she's in the field of people who take care of people who are like sickly, elderly, dying. She said, yeah, I was in the room many times with people who are dying, and they would see something and tell me, "Do you see them? They came after me." And she said, we learn in our business, in our profession, not to always think that these people are crazy, that there is really something they're seeing, and it's not hallucination. We learn to see that this is a real thing, And I even covered this in one episode or read in a book that people who are investigating near-death experiences saying that now the medical staff is being trained how to deal with patients who are seeing things. They're not necessarily always crazy or nuts, or it's chemical imbalance or hallucinations. They're sometimes really truly seeing something, and it's not because people are fools or like whatever is like happening in their brains. There's something legit happening in some of these people's experiences. So this is a new thing that people are being trained. And she told me, as a medical staff, she said, yeah, I'm learning to give people, my patients, people who are dying, the benefit of the doubt that they're really seeing something even though I don't. So there's something that only people who are dying, about to die, see something, and it's not always pleasurable. Sometimes it could be regret, sometimes it could be like, God, I lived my life without you, or I failed as a parent, or it could be God knows what. But I still believe that in that if you still say it, or even if you don't have ability to say it, because maybe like my dad, cancer ate you from the inside, you can't even speak anymore. But if you would still in your heart or if your mind feel it, the inside you will say it or think it. God can hear that cry, and that horrible experience at the end does not have to be the end. It can switch from something horrible to something like blissful, and can have actually a happy ending, even though you can spend your whole life without God, and we don't deserve any blessing. But God is still more than willing to meet you in your last point and say, come in my arms, my child. But this guy didn't have that. He was like, he was crying, like, save me from these entities. They're coming after me. And again, the old me will be like, oh, he was just a nut person, just nuts. But no, the more I'm learning about near-death experiences, written by experts who are like doing statistics, checking medical records, all these people, like there's like this rising number of people who are more familiar with this phenomena. So this is happening. It's just a sad story of this, just another atheist. We just read former story, and now this story of just another atheist who had a horrible ending of his life.
Yeah. In fact, my for years, my wife worked as a home health aide, and so she did that for an organization that was taking care of people that were physically incapable of taking care of themselves, and she offered end of life care. And I can remember her first patient that she had, as her patient was getting close to the end. And of course, my wife was there alone at night because she did it in their home. She called me and was like, she's talking to the wall. There's something she sees that's not really there. And she's, then called me later and it's like, she's talking to a crowd of people in the room, but there's nobody there. And then she called me later and she was really scared. And she said she's screaming that there's too many people in her room, and that everyone needs to leave. And so it was really difficult for me, because it's like, yeah, that's pretty terrifying. And so I just kind of told her like, oh, it's something that happens as the brain is shutting down. They're just kind of going through memories. But knowing now more about, near-death experiences and end-of-life stuff, it's like, wow, maybe not. Maybe you were sharing that house with spirits.
Well, you don't have to share this information. I'm just curious. Do people who work in the medical field, like your wife, are they legally allowed, when they see someone dying, and especially dying without Jesus and having this lack of peace, are they allowed to tell them something about God or pray for them? Like, is that even allowed in America?
So are they legally allowed? Probably not. But if you're telling somebody who's going to be dead in a few hours, who are they going to tell? Right? I mean, covert, get in and kind
No,
of.
I mean, just in case if a coworker or doctor comes in while you're praying, or they check cameras. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, can you be in trouble for trying to help?
No, you could definitely get in trouble for doing that. Yeah, definitely get in trouble. So you'd have to be by yourself with the patient.
Wow. Okay, my turn. We have a few more stories and we'll be done. And of course, my stories are long and yours are short. I'm jealous, but it is what it is. People will get to hear my accent more than yours. Between my bed and television stand, there's only about 1.5 to 2 feet of room. It's plenty of walking room, but super cramped to sit between two big objects. I couldn't even sit on my knees between the two, and I'm the second shortest, 5.5 feet and 5 inches in the house. Mom is the shortest, but also has very bad legs, so she can't bend. My sister is 3 inches taller than me, and my dad is 7 inches taller. And you'll understand why I'm saying all this in just a moment. About a year and a half ago, I woke up facing the TV. One of my comforters must have fell halfway onto the floor during the night. What I woke up to was that my comforter was with someone underneath. You know what I mean, like a big mountain dump. Someone was clearly underneath. Nothing else can make that big of a shape. Its eyes level to me when leaning on my elbow, with about 2 to 3 feet off the floor. For some reason, it made me smile and think of my boyfriend. My boyfriend must be trying to scare me. I laugh and press my finger into his forehead and push him backwards. Only pops back up like one of those punch bags clown boppers, whatever you pronounce this. Now that I felt it, it's clearly a human head with defined weight behind it. The object is also taking the push, meaning it's not coming back instantly. When I push it back as far as my arm can stretch, I would stop for a split second before coming back up. So for her, this was like, oh, my boyfriend came to surprise me. It's just fun and in games. It's like, it's kind of thing we do. So I did this once, twice, 3 times. Each and every time, the body sits straight back up. I'm now coming out to my tired state and realize that can be my boyfriend. He doesn't live with me. I'm like, lady, it took you playing with an entity in your room with a monster just to realize, oh, my boyfriend doesn't live with me. Like you didn't realize this at the very beginning, but she was like, oh, it's my boyfriend, but like he doesn't even live with me. I know that sounds really stupid, but when I wake up, he's on my mind to check for text messages and such. Okay, that's sweet, that's romantic, but still, like, he doesn't live with you and you just expect it that's him. The terror sets in. Someone is in front of me. I've been pushing this person, but no one can possibly sit between the bed and stand. How? I absolutely 100% know that I was pushing someone's forehead and it is heavy, not something light that can easily just come back to me 3, 4 times in a row. Someone's under that blanket. So I started to scramble to get away from the person backing up on my bed. I started to tear up all the blankets off of me and it's still sitting there. Just then, my sister, going to enter her room, sees my terrified face and desperately tries to get away from something. She said my name, and I look at her, still trying to get away. When I turn back, the person's gone. Oh my God, I'll say, God bless your sister. She saved her. So the person left. It was just my comforter flat on the ground, and my sister looking at me in concern, asking me if I'm okay. Okay, so the sister did not even see something beneath the blanket. There's no possible way it was sleep paralysis because I was literally moving my body the entire time. Moving the bump, quote unquote, sitting up and laughing. The weight, the forward and backwards movement, the height and the very clear feeling of someone's head. Then absolutely nothing after I looked at my sister. Shaun, I can say, even though this lady is terrified, and I'll be terrified too, she was very fortunate. She was fortunate first that the thing didn't do anything to her, and that her sister came in the right moment to make this entity go away. Again, we don't have too many details. We don't know if this kept repeating, and I perfectly agree with her. This was not a sleep paralysis, because in sleep paralysis you can only like blink. You can't even talk. You can't move. Nothing like that. Because unfortunately, I had it a few times. But I think the like she was playing with a thing like it's a toy, like it's my nephew or a niece or my boyfriend. Then realizing, wait, my boyfriend doesn't even live with me. It's like, how long did it took you to realize like you're not, that's not him? And she was playing with this entity, and then suddenly freaking out when it realized. So even though I'm not her, I'm just thankful that this thing didn't go back at her and attack her once when the entity was touched. I just think in general she was very fortunate.
Well, and this is one of those cases where it's like, okay, so you have data, you have something that's happening. What else do we have to go on? I mean, we have a size about 2 to 3 feet off the floor, something that was eye level with her. She pushes it. She says it feels like a human head, goes back or goes away, comes back, does that, 3 or 4 times. Um, there's absolutely no evidence that it intended to harm her, right? I mean, it didn't do anything malicious. It was just there. Um, so that's one of those things where we're like, oh, what is it? It's not something that belongs here, but it's not necessarily malicious either.
I have a wild theory in some of the stories we covered before, but also from people's testimonies on YouTube or movies. We know that kids, they're either molested or killed in some houses, like their ghost kind of still dwells or lingers in that home. So the wild theory that just popped in my head is like, what if it's like a spirit of a child that for some reason their life ended, but they're still somewhere there in the vicinity, and they still have that as a child, that playful spirit. It's like maybe just needs a company, maybe just needs someone to play with because it's not a human anymore. So it knows if it show true itself, it will scare people away. Maybe in a way it's lonely. This is a wild theory. I don't believe in this necessarily. I'm just trying to make sense out of this. So some people who are watching this like, what? And you study theology. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just trying to say, what if? Like, what if? Because again, like this entity seemed playful and didn't hurt, didn't speak anything, and it was like calm. The first entity in the first story was giving that cold vibration, cold air to the girl, and she felt frightened. This thing didn't do anything. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, let's say it's real, and let's say it's not demonic entity, but it's a ghost. Then okay, let's dissect what type of ghost. If it's not harmful, then could it belong to someone who lived there and it decided to spend time or to be with a girl instead of someone who is way older, and then in a way play with her, even though that sounds crazy. It's like,
Right.
I don't know how that will work out, but I'm just trying to connect the dots in my mind. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's as good of a guess as any, right? We have no idea what it was, other than it had the feeling of a human head. And I don't know how you would even determine it being human. Just, probably the size based on her pushing it. But yeah, I mean, it's just something that's kind of odd, and we don't have anything else to go on. So we don't know anything that happened. We don't know anything that followed it. She didn't mention any poltergeist activity, nothing threatening, nothing ominous, just this thing doesn't belong here. And it wasn't even she was instantly afraid of it. The terror that she had came from the realization that, oh, it couldn't be my boyfriend, and there's nobody here who can stand in that space. So what is it? So it wasn't even the thing made her afraid. It was more her rationalizing made her afraid. So yeah, I mean, it's not like I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not like what we hear about Mothman, where you're instantly terrified of this thing and you don't know why, right? Her terror came more from her reasoning about it than the actual effect of the thing being there.
Oh my gosh, and in the Mothman's prophecy that was made according to the book, Mothman actually telepathically speaks. Well, in the movie, he's able to make a phone call with Richard Gere, right? But can even speak with the person and tell them what will happen. That's on another level freakier than just thinking something is in your room. This is like Mothman will be way more freakier and scarier. But that's just my opinion. Okay, we have 2 stories left. One longer is your next one, and then I have one short IT story, and we'll be done for tonight.
All right. Okay. To start off this comment, I absolutely do not believe in anything supernatural, but there's 2 things that come to mind I just can't explain and honestly freaked me out, and they both pertain to phenomena I've experienced firsthand. Both of my stories happened when I was locked up as a juvenile within a 6-month period. I won't get into details about what I did, but it ended with 3 months of lockup in a juvenile detention center, followed by 9 months of rehabilitation. The detention center I was in was located in Hawthorne, Nevada. It was an old military medical building that was repurposed when whatever war was going on was over. Anyways, as you can probably guess, a lot of people took their final breaths there. And naturally, because a ton of kids went through there, you could take your pick as to all the ghost stories that circulated. Dead girls walking the hallways, soldiers missing limbs, appearing in people's dreams, and on and on. Of course, I never believed any of them. What you have to understand also is I am a heavy sleeper. I always have been. I could sleep through a storm. Growing up in a household with 4 other kids of varying ages and parents constantly on the verge of divorce, always fighting, teaches you to sleep deep when you finally get the chance. One night, I was in a dead sleep, business as usual. I felt a very sharp rush of electricity, akin to being shocked by a weak handheld taser. I shot straight up in bed and saw a strange, dark mass right above me to the right of my bunk. It's hard to really describe what it looked like, but it was transparent, yet solid, like a dark cloud that didn't have enough water vapor in it.
Shaun, does this remind you like the old Ghostbusters movies? It does.
Yeah,
It does remind me, right? It's almost like
yeah,
similar.
yeah, yeah. I was almost thinking when he's talking about a cloud that's almost transparent, I'm thinking like, Predator, right? Where it's got that kind of shimmery, translucent thing. Yeah. Um, I stared at the thing for a solid 3 seconds before it moved quickly up out of sight near the ceiling. It was dark during lights out, with just enough light from the window that everything below eye level you could see if your eyes were adjusted, but farther up near the ceiling was pitch black. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I haven't seen anything remotely like that before or since. After I was transferred out of that place, I was moved to a facility that was essentially a cabin in the woods at Mount Charleston, which is just outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. The first night I was there, I started experiencing something I didn't even know how to name. But after some research, I figured out it was sleep paralysis. For anyone that doesn't know what it is, essentially, you get locked into your own body while falling asleep or waking up. You're completely immobilized, yet aware of your body and your current state. It's extremely lucid because even though your body is technically asleep, your mind is wide awake. This can lead to some very interesting things. The one thing that stuck with me a lot was astral projection. Apparently, people claimed they could they could actually move their spiritual body separately from their physical body during certain times of sleep. But sleep paralysis was the easiest time. I learned this during my research about sleep paralysis. Anyways, I figured, what the heck? May as well try it and have some fun with this typically very crappy attitude. Seriously, if you've experienced sleep paralysis, it sucks. So I started experimenting, trying to move around outside of my body while I was immobilized. And to my surprise, I actually started to make progress. I started by sitting up, then eventually managed to move around my room, then the whole cabin, and even made some excursions outside. I didn't believe for a single second that any of this was real in the slightest. I rationalized it by saying my mind was just using familiar surroundings and actions to utilize my fully awake sleeping mind to envision whatever it wanted, which included walking around while my physical body was laying in bed. One morning it was very different though. My internal clock was set to about 30 minutes to wake up, and this was prime time for sleep paralysis and my current pastime of astral projection, which I still thought as a load of horse crap. I started with my usual routine of sitting up to get out of my bed and started walking around. Except this time, I didn't manage to sit up or get out of bed at all. I was stuck about halfway up into a sitting position. My legs were locked down to the bed and my wrists felt like they were shackled down to the bed. This had never happened to me before, and it scared the heck out of me. I looked back, and the strangest thing happened. I actually saw my sleeping body underneath me, totally asleep. I had never once stopped to look back where I was sleeping, and I found it strangely creepy to see myself back there. Like I said, I figured all of this was just my mind playing tricks on me, So why would my mind even bother rendering itself back there? It was deeply unsettling to me. By now, I'm in full panic mode, adrenaline pumping, and I'm getting more lucid by the second. During my early sleep paralysis session, and even when I started moving around, it was pretty strange. So it would cause me to wake up when I'd get particularly scared or uncomfortable, but I wasn't waking up at all this time. I turned around and faced the rest of the room, and I saw the most god awful thing I'd ever seen, or probably ever will see in my entire life. I thought the black cloud from earlier was scary, but it had nothing on this. It was a humanoid figure in the closet in the room. Its proportions were all screwed up, super skinny arms and legs with a stout torso and a misshapen head. It was sickly white with yellow blotches covering it head to toe. It didn't have genitals or a single hair on its entire body from head to toe, yet I could tell it was male somehow. The worst part was its face. It was completely blank. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, no ears, just completely blank. Yet, despite the lack of eyes, the darn thing was looking right at me. I've never been so scared in my entire life. Locked down to my bed, unable to move at all, and of course, it has to start moving towards me. Its legs and arms contorted and twisted around in impossible ways until it was low to the ground and rushed at me inconceivably fast until it was directly face to face or face to lack of face with me. I woke up at that exact instant, sweaty, screamy, and thrashing around in my bed. No one knew what was wrong with me, and I refused to tell or even speak to anyone for the rest of the day. It seriously scared me, and I was terrified of falling asleep for weeks afterwards. Strangely, that incident completely cured my sleep paralysis, and I haven't had another occurrence since then. I've slept soundly ever since. This comment ended up turning out a lot longer than I meant for it to, but this is the first time I've ever told this story to anyone, for fear of getting dismissed as made up stories or my mind just playing tricks on me, and they stick out so vividly in my memory. I still don't believe in the supernatural, but I honestly can't explain how or why these things happen to me. That's
Dude, if you
terrifying.
don't believe in the supernatural after all of this, like what will make you believe? Okay, couple
Right.
of things. First I think like why why was this person uh at different locations, first in this military hospital and then in this cabin? Why was it this person attack? Uh, I think it's a guy, even though it doesn't say the gender, but I let's assume it's a guy. Um, so he or she had some problems, probably some addictions. That's why they ended up in rehabilitation, even though they said they don't want to disclose at the very beginning. So I'm thinking, could it be that something they're using and abusing their life opens, so to speak, a portal or doorway to these entities to being, playful, but not playful in a good way, to enter the door or a portal in your life so they can have access to, and to torment you. So I'm thinking, could that, whatever they're abusing, because they're abusing either drugs or alcohol or both, but that's usually what happens. So I'm like, if you're abusing something and that opened the door to the supernatural and attacks, I'm not surprised because I heard many stories like that. But then also the creature that was explained that way. I don't know if you saw the latest Alien Romulus, the latest creature in the movie looks exactly like that, except for the face. Everything else reminds me of the last Alien hybrid in the movie. So, but the way it says it moved like it had twitches and jerks. It also, on the other hand, reminds me of Resident Evil monsters. Not all of them, but somehow they would because if you have broken or unnaturally grown limbs, you can't move normally. Like they'll be like, it's almost like you're doing breakdance in a way. So it's like it's a combo of so many weird details. And then he says, "Oh, I still don't know if supernatural happened, dude. Like you were in the astral projection, you saw your body, you can rationalize as much as you want to. You saw something that came after you. You should be thankful that you're okay and unharmed. You'll still have
Right.
probably PTSD until you die. But I hope this person goes and looks for spiritual help, because with spiritual help, these attacks and whatever he was going through can stop. So yeah, that's my impression.
So you said that you've had sleep paralysis. Have you ever had anything scary like that happen?
No, thank God. The first time it happened in my life was about 25 years ago when I became a believer. I was like, and this was back in Europe. I'm like, how come I never experienced this in my life, but now I just became a believer and this is happening to me? So I understood very easily. I connected the dots. This is not a coincidence, and it's on a form of a spiritual attack. So it was pitch black the first time. I didn't see anything, but it was, I don't know if my mind was playing with me, like the fear, or if I really sensed something dark, like dark presence in the room. I didn't feel cold there. Nothing touched me. There was no voice speaking to me. But I remember I wanted to yell my dad's name to come and help me. But I wasn't able to do anything or move. Just blinking. That's all you can do. You can't do absolutely anything. And then, what can you do? You're a new Christian. You're just inside yourself. You're just saying a prayer by thinking about it, but you cannot actually say it because you lose your ability to speak. So I remember praying for God's help or rebuking if there's anything out there, to be gone. So after probably a couple of minutes or few minutes, and I can determine the length, because when you're scared, everything seems to be so slow. Just like when you have fun, time seems to go so fast. And then that happened later also a few times, but the first time was the scariest time. And thank God I didn't see or experience anything like that. It was still very scary, but not like that.
Yeah, I haven't had any sleep paralysis since I became a Christian. But before then, I used to get it a lot, and I've never seen anything. I never felt anything, scary. Just woke up and couldn't move. I mean, and I guess that's pretty terrifying when when you wake up and your body doesn't respond to movement. But yeah, I used to get it all the time, but I never had any of the experiences associated with it. No creatures, no bad feelings, nothing like that, other than just I can't move, which is
But
pretty terrifying in itself.
you know what I also noticed? It would only happen when I'll be sleeping on my back. It wouldn't happen if I'll be on my side or on my stomach. There's something about that, because experts are saying, well, we don't know about spiritual thing. It's this medical phenomenon. So, but I'm thinking, what if it's both? When I had the dog coming before, he was talking about, like, well, what if it's both? But I noticed in my case it will be only when I'll be sleeping on back.
So the most terrifying one that I had, and I can still remember the house I was living in when it happened. I had just gotten married, um, and I was sleeping. I always fall asleep on my back, but I woke up on my stomach with my face down in the pillow, and I couldn't breathe and I couldn't move. And so that's one where you're like, okay, wiggle the fingers, try to get it awake, because you're just trying to get some movement back before you run out of air. And so that was the worst one. But yeah, I mean, it
But
was
wait, how did you survive? How did you start breathing?
to wiggle the fingers and get your arm to move, and then you can just push yourself over. Yep.
Dude, but what if that's not enough time? Like, how long can you hold breath in your lungs and not breathe? Like, most of us cannot do more than a minute. Oh my God.
Well, to quote Joe Rogan, sometimes they die.
That's a horrible quote. Oh my gosh. Yes, that seems really like a nasty spiritual attack. Like, your life was in jeopardy back then. I don't want to over spiritualize it, but what if some spiritual entity over there, let's not say it's a demon or Satan, whatever, but even usually those troopers, they have bigger bosses. What if they knew, the way God would use you in the future when this happened, and they wanted to prevent it by suffocating you? Maybe not. Maybe it was merely medicinal case. I don't know. I'm just trying to assess it from spiritual perspective. Like, what if there was a reason for that happening that was more than merely scientific? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we have one super short story and it has few sentences. I'll probably finish this in 30 seconds, but it's an extremely sad story and very creepy. I was working as a programmer, so IT guy. One day, one of my coworkers yelled, I would sell my soul to the devil to figure out why this program is not working. 5 seconds later, he had his answer. 10 seconds later, after that, a mirror in the privy jumps off the wall and shatters in the far corner, which is a distance of about 15 feet from wall to corner. That's the whole story. The shortest story for tonight, but one of the saddest and creepiest. So, okay, so the IT guy, the programmer, couldn't fix the problem with his code. And then, unfortunately, he said, he would sell his soul if he would just find the answer. The answer magically, because it sounds like magic, mysteriously comes in 5 seconds in his mind. He fixes the problem, and then the mirror that was right there falls down, breaks down. It's almost like, okay, you see that? That's the sign that you made a deal with me. You made a pact with me. Now you belong to me. But you know what? I hear so many Christians saying, "Oh, this musician, this actor, sold their soul to the devil." I don't know why, but I always have to remind them. You know what? Even if that happened, you cannot actually sell your soul to the devil. Your soul does not belong to you or to the devil. God can snatch it up and redeem it in any second. So it's not like, oh, they sold this. What does it mean? It means usually they made a pact by offering themselves to be a slave, to serve a higher master that is not Yahweh, it's not Jesus. And if it was done through blood or through promise or a vow, whatever it was, a reason to make that pact, to make that covenant with the devil. But don't think for a second, even if you're one of those people watching this or you know someone, don't think for a second that's the end. God can intervene, and soul can be redeemed, and sins can be forgiven, and you can be your whole you again without having pact with the devil. That pact can be broken by the blood of Jesus, who is way more superior than the devil. So I don't know why sometimes I have to remind people, like, listen, I don't know who sold their soul, even if that's a thing. But let's say that's really a thing. But don't think for a second that that is inevitably a final condition of that person, even if they truly renounce God and say, "Well, devil, if you will give me this, then I'll belong to you." Even if someone said something like that, that's still not the ending. As long as that person breathes and is alive, that person can still come to Jesus, and that oath with the devil can be snapped, can be broken, can disappear in a second, because Jesus' covenant and his blood is way more superior than the devil trying to get your blood and your the pact that you made with him. So that can mean nothing. Once when God, as the big boss, steps in your life, he will trample that devil like that snake is nothing, right? We know this in Genesis 3:15. We know that the God-man will come and trample of the snake's head. And like whatever you made pact, whatever the devil promised to you, it's not like you owe anything to him. So you belong to God. And I hope this IT guy came to God eventually. I don't know. It's such a short story, such a tragic story. This guy probably wasn't even thinking what he was saying. He was literal. He was just like, oh, I'm so desperate. If I would just get the answer, I'll tell myself to the devil. Boom. He got the answer and the mirror fell. It's almost like, there was an entity that witnessed what was happening, and the contract, invisible contract, was made. It's such a sad story.
So I have a silly story associated with this. I was in high school, and my study hall was the same room as my English class. I had study hall right before English, and I had just finished using the last of my notebook paper. And so and this was on the opposite side of the school from my locker. So I didn't have a chance to go back to my locker to get another notebook. So we're in English class. I just used my last paper. And the teacher was like, okay, pull out a sheet of paper. I said, I don't have one. Okay, we'll borrow one from a partner. So I turned behind me to my buddy. I was like, hey, can I get a piece of paper? And he goes, yeah, if you sell me your soul, I'll give you a piece of paper. So I had to write up the contract that I would sell him my soul and sign it at the bottom. So I did that for a piece of paper. like thinking it's stupid, right? The next day, I brought more paper to school, and I realized I would probably need that. So I went back to him and I was like, "Hey, can I buy my soul back from you?" And he's like, "No, but what you can do is you can get me 2 more souls to exchange for yours." So then I went around to my other friends and purchased their souls, signed contracts, and then brought them to him so I could get my soul back. Which is such a childish and immature understanding of how souls work. But I thought it was kind of funny to tie into the story that I had actually sold my soul at one point and bought it back.
Dude, you were worse than Esau. At least you got a piece of paper. Man, you're such a bad businessman. Back in the days, God was telling you, Shaun, son, I blessed you with many things, but economics and business, that's not for you, my son. It's like, don't deal with that anymore, please.
Hey, I don't know. I purchased 2 souls, so I mean, I'm pretty good at trafficking.
You purchased for the devil. It's like, what the heck? Oh my gosh. Okay, this was funny. The ending was so funny. In a way, I enjoyed stories, but all the stories also made me, yeah, yeah. This was the first comment the whole night. Say hi to Haven family. Well, thank you for the comment. Yeah. So I just want to say, even though we enjoyed all these stories, there's also a sort of sadness and what proper word to use? This feeling of empathy for all these souls who suffered through either demonic attacks, being attacked, being terrified, not asking God to help them, losing their lives tragically, like that Muslim missionary who committed suicide. To learn, there's always some missing details that we don't know, and there's always a thread of sadness that for me I felt like, it's like, what do you do? Like, life is such a mystery, and we're not always giving closures. We're not always giving all the details, and it's like there's so many tragic stories out there, and there's so much regret in our lives, in my life too. So it's like it should be our lesson. Like, hey, whatever you do, just make sure you're reconciled with Jesus by the end of the day. I don't mean literal 24-hour day, but by the end of life, and you don't know when that will happen. But make sure, despite of all your failures, sins, whatever, make sure you're reconciled with God. Just make sure that should be number one priority. Number one priority is not this podcast. Number one priority shouldn't be career, making money. Number one should be not just like even going live for the sake of fame and glory. Certainly, we don't have that. It's such a small podcast. But it should be like, hey, even though we have fun, even though we want to be spiritual, theological, religious, intellectual, all of that, but also be reconciled to Christ. And that's my final message for today. And I just want to invite everyone this Sunday, 7 p.m. Central Time. I'll have Joshua Davidson back with new guest Travis. We'll be talking about, is it true that religion poisons everything, which was a subtitle to a famous book by a famous atheist, Christopher Hitchens, who died tragically. We think probably without God, but still we don't know that. So we'll be talking about, is it true that Christian religion poisons so many things? So we'll be attacking that topic, not people, but the topic. So that's coming this Sunday at 7 p.m. Central Time. Shaun, you have the honor to do the concluding part.
Yeah. Well, what we see here is that our world is not just made of stuff. We live in a universe, a reality that is haunted by entities that, whether they want what is good for us, like the angels, or they hate us and they want our destruction, like the demons, or if they fall somewhere in between and are just they really couldn't care less. We need to be aware that the spirit world is dynamic, and there's a lot of variety, and that it does pose a real threat and a real danger to us. And just simply saying that you don't believe in it is not going to protect you. I mean, think about how many of the people of their stories that we read said that they were an atheist or a skeptic. Your skepticism won't save you. What we need to do is we need to cry out to the Lord Jesus Christ and ask him to save us from our sins, save us from our own stupidity, save us from our own mistakes, like selling your soul in high school, and ask him to come into your life, to be Lord of your life, and to rule over all of the darkness and the wicked spirits that would afflict you. And he is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he will rule over them. He will crush them with a rod of iron. I mean, there's nothing that they can do against him. Every knee is going to bow. You will bow your knee at some point. So make that today, because today is the day of salvation.
Amen. Such a good message. Thank you, Shaun, so much. I really enjoyed. And everyone, we'll see you in about 46 hours with new guests and new topic. Until then, be encouraged to pursue God, regardless and despite of all your sin, mistakes, addictions, whatever you're going through. I won't say it doesn't matter, because it does, but in this context, it doesn't matter what you did. Today's the day of salvation. Today's the day of restoration. Today's the day of you being healed and protected by Jesus. Go and serve your King. Amen. And have a good night.